the gallery of the unseen. For most of my life, shadows weren't just an absence of light, but the very fabric of my world. Blind since childhood, I learned to see through touch, sound, and smell. When I critiqued art, I did so by sensing the emotion woven into the canvas and the whispers of the sculptor's chisel. Then came the surgery, the one that promised a miracle. And as the bandages were peeled away, light greeted me for the first time in decades. With sight came a newfound appetite for the world's hidden flavors. It was Edward Wyndham, a collector known for his gallery of the peculiar, who extended an invitation I couldn't resist. He promised an exhibition unlike any other, a collection that would appeal to my unique perspective. His gallery was an anachronism, a piece of historical fiction amidst Boston's modernity. Edward himself was a character from another era, with his outdated attire and intense, searching eyes. "Your eyes will see what has remained unseen," he said as he ushered me through the halls of his mansion. Turned. Gallery. Each room was a portal to another world, where art wasn't just viewed, but experienced. The gallery's main attraction, however, was hidden behind a door that Edward opened with a reverence typically reserved for sacred rites. "This," he whispered, "is the heart of my collection." The room was somber, the air thick with anticipation. Paintings cloaked in darkness lined the walls, their veils hinting at secrets lying dormant beneath. The Gallery of the Unseen, he called it, a name that made my pulse quicken. It was here, Edward explained, that one could truly understand art, through the revelation of unseen truths. My hands trembled as I reached for the first shroud. Pulling it back, I was met with the gaze of a woman whose eyes seemed to pierce through the centuries. The moment our eyes met, a halo of iridescent light burst forth from the frame, unveiling a vision of her last breath, a death both cruel and beautiful. With each unveiled painting, a new death danced before me, a waltz of the macabre that left me breathless. Shipwrecks, duels, falls from grace, all were captured in these frames of fate. "Tell me," Edward's voice cut through the silence, "what do you see?" The truth was a bitter pill, a foresight into the final moments of life, an artist's dark gift made visible to me. "Death," I replied, my voice a mere thread of sound. "Each painting shows its subject's end." He nodded, his face the picture of tragic acceptance, and now my own. The final piece was a self-portrait, a mirror that reflected Edward's essence. The aura around this one was a tapestry of betrayal and blood, a prophecy of an end at the hands of one he loved. A cold realization settled in as he sought confirmation from my newfound sight. His own death, at the hands of his son, was laid bare before us. The gallery had transformed from an exhibition to a stage where fate itself was the spectacle. Edward then proposed a scheme, a gamble against destiny itself. It was an offer that appealed not just to my curiosity, but to something primal within me. The darkness had been my comfort for so long. Yet now, in the face of these revelations, I found myself at a crossroads. Could the course of fate truly be altered? I faced Edward, and within the gallery's oppressive stillness, I made my decision. This was no longer just about witnessing the unseen. It was about challenging it. The air in the Gallery of the Unseen seemed to thicken with my decision to help Edward. The weight of the revelation about his impending betrayal hung between us, a dark cloud of inevitability. But I had agreed to his plan, a plan to disrupt the sequence of fate that had been unveiled to me through the eerie gift my restored vision had granted. With each step through the gallery, I felt the brush of otherworldly whispers against my newly visual world. Edward's private collection was not just art. It was a chronicle of demise, each piece an epitaph, waiting to be read by eyes that could interpret the final verses. "We begin tonight," Edward declared, his voice resolute. His finger brushed against the portrait that spelled his doom. "I cannot accept this predetermined end, and with your help, we will change it." The first move in our game against fate was to confront his son, Michael. But Edward insisted. It had to be done with caution, with an understanding of the forces we were attempting to outmaneuver. Fate is a cunning adversary, he said, leading me to a study that felt like a sanctuary from the gallery's chilling revelations. As we planned, the history of the Wyndham family unfolded like a mystery novel, with Edward's ancestors all having met untimely and often tragic ends. It was as if a curse lay upon the lineage, a curse that now seemed to reach out for him. "We will host a dinner," he suggested, "a gathering under the guise of reconciliation and unity. You, my friend, will be the guest of honor." The evening arrived with a nervous energy, the mansion dressed in deceptive finery. The guests, Boston's elite, alongside Edward's estranged son, were unaware of the play staged before them. Michael, a man with sharp features and sharper eyes, watched me with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. As the dinner unfolded, I realized that every course served was a step in Edward's intricate dance. The conversations, carefully guided by Edward's skilled hand, circled around the themes of legacy, art, and mortality. When the time came for me to speak, my voice echoed in the grand dining hall. "Art is a testament to our lives," I said, "but it is also a window to truths we often cannot face." Glancing at Michael, I saw his eyes flicker with a hidden understanding. The night progressed, and the atmosphere shifted. It was no longer just a dinner. It was a turning point, a pivot upon which the very essence of destiny might balance. The guests had departed. Edward and I retreated to his study. "Do you think we have swayed the path?" he asked, his question hanging like a painting yet to be unveiled. "I do not know," I admitted. "But if fate can be swayed, tonight was our best stroke." Sleep proved elusive that night, for the gallery had one final secret to reveal, a painting that was not draped in velvet, but hidden behind a false wall. A painting of my own visage, the colors swirling in chaotic harmony, an unfinished piece that seemed to wait for my hand to guide it towards completion. This gallery, this mansion of mysteries, had become more than a place of art. It had become a crossroads of the seen and the unseen, the lived and the yet to live. I was no longer an observer. I had become a participant in a narrative that was still unfolding, my own end unwritten and waiting for me to seize the brush. The morning brought a new painting to light, one that wasn't in the gallery, but in the very real and tangible world. News arrived. Michael Wyndham had been found dead. The shock was palpable. Edward, grief-stricken yet composed, looked to me. "It seems fate has a cruel sense of irony," he whispered. Had we altered the course, only to invite a more twisted conclusion? Or had we, in our naivety, played directly into fate's grand design? The answer was as elusive as the shadows I once called home. Faceless statue. I stood before the grand entrance of the museum, a place that once filled me with wonder, now a source of unspeakable dread. The Grecian statue known as the Faceless Muse stood in the central gallery, a marble enigma that had captivated me since its mysterious acquisition. Its featureless visage, where a face should have been, was the subject of intense speculation, both scholarly and superstitious. Tonight, the museum was silent, save for the soft echo of my footsteps and the whispers of a past that clung to the ancient artifacts. I was here after hours, not as a guest, but as a seeker of truths, hidden within the cold, stone gaze of the Faceless Muse. My journey began 2 weeks prior, when an encrypted email landed in my inbox, sent from an anonymous source with intimate knowledge of my research into the occult and mythological. The message was brief, with a riddle that spoke of a faceless guide to the secrets of time. I knew immediately it referred to the museum's enigmatic statue, equipped with my tools of trade. A notebook, an infrared camera, and an EMF detector. I approached the statue. Its face, or rather, the lack thereof, was smooth, offering no clue as to why the sculptor had left it devoid of features. Local lore suggested the face was stolen by a jealous rival, while some occult enthusiasts claimed it was a portal to another realm, a gateway that should never be opened. I reached out, my hand hovering mere inches from the marble, when a cold draft swept through the gallery. The air turned frigid, my breath misting before me. I hadn't noticed the chill until that moment, and an inexplicable sense of urgency settled in the pit of my stomach. I set up my equipment, aiming the infrared camera at the statue, hoping to capture any variations in temperature or unexpected anomalies. The MF detector remained silent, its lights stubbornly still. Hours passed, and my initial trepidation gave way to frustration. Was I merely chasing shadows, lured by an ancient legend and a cryptic message? That's when I noticed the change. The notebook on the pedestal beside me, once filled with scribbles and theories, now lay open to a blank page. Not just blank, pristine, as if never touched by pen. Puzzled, I flipped through the pages, but all my notes were gone, erased without a trace. My heart raced as I looked up at the statue. The faceless muse seemed different somehow, more imposing. The gallery was no longer silent, but filled with the faintest sound, like a murmur of voices just out of reach, an ancient chant that seemed to emanate from the statue itself. I began to record, speaking softly into the camera, narrating the events. As I did, the air around the statue began to shimmer, a subtle distortion that sent a shiver down my spine. I paused, watching in disbelief as the outlines of a face seemed to press from within the stone, straining against its marble prison, yearning for release. I stumbled backward, my equipment forgotten. This was no longer a mere investigation. I was standing on the precipice of the unknown, a witness to something profound and terrifying. The faceless visage began to contort, the marble cracking with the sound of thunder, echoing through the once quiet halls. It was then that the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a voice that resonated within my very soul. It was neither menacing nor comforting, but it commanded attention with an authority that transcended time. "Seeker," it intoned, "you have been chosen. Chosen for what?" I had no answers, only a cascade of questions that flooded my mind. Yet, a part of me understood that this encounter was no accident. I was meant to be here, drawn to this moment by forces that I had only begun to comprehend. As the face continued to press against its marble confines, I realized I couldn't let this moment pass. Whatever was happening, I needed to see it through. My fear was palpable, a living thing, but it was dwarfed by my insatiable need to know, to understand. With resolve steeling my nerves, I stepped forward once more, my eyes locked onto the transforming statue. The gallery, the museum, the entire world seemed to fall away until there was nothing left but the faceless muse, and I locked in a silent communion. The museum's clock tower began to chime, its bells tolling for midnight. As the final chime faded, the face burst forth, a blinding light spilling from the cracks. I shielded my eyes, and when I dared to look again, the statue was gone. In its place stood a figure, both ancient and ageless, its face a blur of shifting features. It spoke again, its voice clear, the words echoing, "Not in the gallery, the train to nowhere." The station was shrouded in mist when I arrived. It was an odd little platform, quaint with Victorian-style lampposts, casting an ethereal glow. The clock above the station house had stopped at midnight, the hands frozen in time, as if hesitating to proceed. And then the train pulled in. It was a relic, a steam-powered locomotive, its metal body echoing with the ghosts of a bygone era. I glanced at my ticket, a gift from a stranger, a peculiar man in a Homburg hat who'd left it on my table at the coffee shop with a note. For when you need to remember, the words echoed in my mind as I stepped into the carriage. Inside, the train was luxury personified, reminiscent of the Orient Express I'd seen in old films. Polished wood, plush seats, and brass fittings gleamed under the warm light of gas lamps. But it was deserted. No passengers, no chatter, No sound but the distant wail of the whistle and the steady rhythm of the wheels on tracks. I found my compartment, and it was as if it were waiting for me, my name etched onto a brass plate on the door, Mr. Davies. The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the cold outside. I settled in, the cushioned seat embracing me, and as the train began to move, a sense of unease settled within me. The landscape outside the window was a blur, and time seemed to lose meaning. The rhythm of the train was hypnotic, and I felt myself slipping into a trance, my eyelids heavy. That's when I saw them. They flitted between the carriages, just beyond the corner of my eye, elusive, almost teasing. I followed, compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity. I walked through carriage after carriage, each one transitioning seamlessly from one historical period to another, from the opulence of the Belle Epoque to the functional austerity of wartime. Each carriage was a perfect recreation, and still, there were no other passengers, no one but the shadows and me. It was in the last carriage, a luxurious observation deck, as the conductor had promised, where I found him staring out into the void the train was hurtling towards. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The conductor turned slowly, his face etched with lines that spoke of countless journeys. "You already know," he said, his voice deep and measured. The train shuddered, a violent, jarring motion that sent me sprawling to the floor. When I looked up, the conductor was gone, and in his place was a note, "Find the timekeeper's key." My heart raced as I picked myself up. What was the timekeeper's key, and where could I possibly find it on a train that seemed to stretch into infinity? I began to search, opening compartments, rummaging through the belongings that seemed to belong to no one. It was in a suitcase, in a compartment that smelled of rosewater and gunpowder, where I found it, a small, unassuming brass key, warm to the touch, as if it had been waiting for me. The train lurched again, this time more violently, a roar filling the air, drowning out the scream of the whistle. I was thrown against the window, and through the glass, I saw it, a darkness ahead, a tunnel that seemed to consume the light. We were heading straight for it, the train to nowhere, and I had the key that might unlock its mysteries or seal my fate. The tunnel approached, the darkness enveloping us, and as we plunged into the abyss, I felt the key pulsing with a life of its own. As the train thundered into the tunnel, an uncanny silence fell. The windows showed only the inky blackness outside, a stark contrast to the warm glow within my compartment. My hand gripped the key tightly, its peculiar warmth seeping into my palm, as if it contained a life force of its own. The sense of dread that had been simmering within me since boarding now boiled over. The rhythmic clacking of the train over the tracks had been a comforting constant. But in the silence of the tunnel, it was the absence of the tunnel, it was the absence of that sound that unnerved me the most. I rose, steadying myself against the plush armrest. The carriage was still as empty as when I'd first explored it. The silence was suffocating, so complete I could hear the blood thrumming in my ears. The key seemed to be guiding me, its warmth increasing as I moved towards the front of the train. Compartment after compartment I passed, each a perfect diorama of a different era. A creeping realization dawned on me that these were scenes from my life, memories crystallized in time, places I had been, moments I had lived. I reached the conductor's booth, its door closed with a sign hanging on the brass handle, "The Timekeeper's Domain." The warmth from the key reached a scorching intensity. It was here. Whatever the key unlocked was behind this door. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click, and the door swung open without a sound. The booth was not what I had expected. Instead of the usual controls and levers, there was a single chair facing a vast array of clocks of all shapes and sizes, their hands moving erratically. In the chair sat the conductor, his eyes closed, a serene expression on his face. Surrounding him were the shadows I had seen earlier. They seemed to be in a state of flux, human shapes that wavered as if they were barely holding themselves together. I stepped inside, and the conductor's eyes snapped open. "You've found the key," he stated, his voice neither pleased nor surprised. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper amongst the cacophony of ticking clocks. "This," he said, gesturing to the chaos around him, "is where all times converge. This train, it runs on the temporal rails laid by the timekeeper, and you've come to take his place." "Take his place?" I echoed, incredulous. He nodded solemnly. "The timekeeper is bound to the train, ensuring it runs on time through the times. But the timekeeper is also human and must one day pass on the mantle." I struggled to comprehend. "Why me? I don't belong here." "You've been prepared for this journey since the day you were born." As the weight of his words settled upon me, the shadows began to coalesce, becoming more distinct, more human. I realized then that they weren't just shadows. They were echoes of past timekeepers, their tenure on the train leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of time. "You have a choice," the conductor continued. "Take the seat, become the timekeeper, and guide the train through the ages. Or return to your time with no memory of this journey, as if it were naught but a dream." I looked at the chair, feeling the pull of destiny. The warmth of the key in my hand was now a comforting heat, a beacon in the all-consuming dark. The shadows watched, an audience to my decision. The train seemed to hold its breath, clocks ticking the only sound in the expectant quiet. With a resolve I didn't know I had, I made my choice.